Welcome to this week's episode of Coffee Corner Motorsport Four Beans a Podcast. This is, of course, the news show, Formula One Espresso News, where I bring you all of the latest from the paddock to the podcast via my shed. We've got a 30-minute show as always, and this week we're going to be talking about Adrian Newey and his start at Aston Martin, Fred Vasseur and Depressia, pecking order post-Barcelona, Alpine, who's really in charge after, of course, what happened last week with Oliver Oakes, and then finally, the FIA and just what on earth is going on with the proposed changes to not only regulations, but also how the FIA is run. So, if all of that takes your fancy, there's enough time to hit that follow, like, subscribe button, whatever is available to you on the platform you're listening to this podcast on. And yeah, let's get into it. Formula One Espresso News. Let's go. Right, so we're going to start off very quickly with Adrian Newey and that article that was released by Aston Martin. This would amuse me, not because it was an article from Adrian Newey, that doesn't amuse me, but the fact that Aston Martin have got an AI Fernando Alonso who reads it to you. This isn't made up at all. If you go onto the Aston Martin Formula One website and you click on the interview, it asks if you want it to be read to you by Fernando Alonso. Now, this is a real surreal experience. I recommend just doing it, if for nothing else, just the laughs that it provokes. But on a serious note, there was an article from Adrian Newey giving an update on Aston Martin and, of course, his time there since he started at the beginning of March. Now, naturally, this doesn't go into any great detail about what he's doing. He talks very much about how he's focused on 2026 regulations, how he's been talking to the drivers, he's given pointers to the 2025 car whilst drinking coffee in the canteen, but his pure focus is on 2026. He goes into some great detail about what's going on with the team, how he's been welcomed there, how the facilities are world class. So he talked about the wind tunnel. Now, bear in mind that Adrian is used to that archaic, out-of-date Red Bull wind tunnel that dates back to like the Second World War. We know it's been a massive problem for Red Bull over the years. We know that even though they've had issues with the wind tunnel, they've had a great staff set up in terms of getting around that. We also know that Aston Martin have got one of the best, if not the best, wind tunnels in Formula One history, which is a scary thought, really. Yeah, we're used to Adrian designing stuff in an archaic, World War II wind tunnel, and we're about to give the bloke a state-of-the-art, all singing, all dancing, purpose-built wind tunnel, as well as a shed load of wind tunnel time with Aston Martin's current performance. But he talked about how the team is strengthening in departments like the aerodynamic department, how he's looked at the regulations, and that when the 2026 regulations first came out, they looked very prescribed into what you do. But actually, once you strip away the surface and delve into them, you can actually see there's a lot of scope for developing. And he said that with a little bit of a wry smile, which makes you think that he's certainly found something that he can unlock. He talked about how he's found something, they're looking at it, but obviously you can't tell if other teams have found the same thing. That part remains to be seen. In talk about regulations, we know teams are employing people to look at these regulations in a lot more detail. Red Bull have just added to their legal team to look at the contracts for the 2026 engine regulations and have employed a whole legal team to basically try and find loopholes within these rules. We know it's common. We know that teams do it. It's just now becoming more of an open secret rather than a hidden secret, which is what it potentially was before. But yeah, Adrian Newey looks like he's firmly locked in and focused on 2020. So Martin's performance suggests that they've written off 2025. Fernando said that he's spoken to Adrian Newey and he understands the focus being rightly on 2026 and that 2025 is pretty much a write-off. And for me, I suppose this all goes back to what's happening with wind tunnel allocations and what's happening with the way it's divvied out and the new regulations in terms of who gets what for wind tunnels and how this could be sort of done about in the wrong way. And what I mean by that is that Aston Martin are currently towards the bottom end of the Constructors' Championship, which means when the wind tunnel resets in the summer, they will get a larger amount than, say, a team that's at the top like a McLaren. Now, a team like Aston Martin don't need the money from the prize money from Formula One because they're already rich enough with Lawrence Stroll. So is this a case of Aston Martin are genuinely actually sacrificing 2025 performance to give Adrian more wind tunnel time for 2026? It wouldn't be the first time I've heard this. You'll obviously never get a public admittance of this from anyone within the team, but it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? When you sit here and think about it, why wouldn't you? If the couple of millions you'll get for moving a place up in the constructors, you can easily write off, then actually it's probably worth it, isn't it? And I think that's what Aston Martin doing. I think they've pretty much written off this season. They know they're not going to get anywhere near the top half of the constructors, so they're kind of going, well, you know what, let's bank the wind tunnel time. We're okay for the money. Let's give Adrian as much time as we can. And if he can, dabble a bit in the 2025 car in terms of trying some stuff out, so be it. But if not, do you know what? We're not really bothered about it. It seems absolutely crazy that a team's doing this, but then when you've got Adrian Newey and you can give him all that wind tunnel time, why not? We also know that Enrico Cardal isn't yet joining. He's joining in July as the technical director. So from that point of view as well, if you haven't got a technical director to actually run your team because you're waiting for him to finish his garden leave from Ferrari, again, this makes perfect sense to just keep waiting and waiting and waiting. And then both of them can focus on 2026. And is this what we're going to see? Are we going to see a Cardile or Newey partnership for 2026 for Aston Martin, which is pretty phenomenal when you think about it, is something that I think is quite scary if you're someone outside looking in. But yeah, for me, the article was, it went into a bit of detail, but it was more around just putting Adrian's name back out there because we've obviously not seen him anywhere. We've not heard from him. So I think it was Aston Martin just kind of building the hype up and just saying, look, our performances are bad, but we've got Adrian. And I think that's pretty much what it was. It did the job it was intended to do. So for me, it was a good article. I've written about it over on coffeecornermotorsport.com. So if you do want a quick glance into what the article was about and a quick summary of my thoughts, head on over to the website. The article's on there. It's one of a couple of pieces I've started doing, which is more around Formula One news. The website up until now has traditionally been based around sort of race reviews and race previews. What I'm trying to do is branch it into news as well, but in a written format. A couple of reasons for this. One, because I can do a written format a lot easier than filming a video, and I can go into a lot more depth on things. And secondly, it's something I want to do longer term. So by having the articles on the website and people going to the website, it will hopefully build up a base of evidence that I can use towards hopefully get more media accreditation to attend some things. So if you do get a chance, please head on over to coffeecornermotorsport.com, click on articles. If you want just the news part, click F1 News. If you want it all on there, there's Formula 2, there's IndyCar, there's Formula E on there, there's Formula 1 on there. So there's lots on there to actually get excited about. There's F1 Academy on there as well. So if you do get a chance, check it out and just drop me a comment over what you think on the website and what you want to see more of. Because for me, it's a work in evolution. It got launched in January. I really want it to be for fans. I want it to be a different way of doing news. So if there's anything on there you want to see included or anything on there that you feel would be good, drop us a message and let us know. Coming on to Fred Vasseur being under pressure. Now, this on the back of Ferrari's performance. Now, Ferrari's performance is shocking. No one can deny that. The drivers maybe haven't done their part, but also the car hasn't done his bit. Ferrari made a really bold move to change their front suspension going into the final year of the regulations. And it's a move that looks like it's spectacularly backfired, if I'm honest. They don't know what's going on with the car. They're shelving updates. They were supposed to bring updates to this weekend at Imola. They're not bringing those now. They've parked them because they don't know about the correlation between the wind tunnel and on-track performance. And they just don't know where their development is going currently. Now that, if you're Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc, is obviously really annoying. But also, if you're Fred Vasseur, that's got to put them under pressure. Tifosi demand championships. They always have done. They're not happy unless they've got championships back in Maranello. And Fred Vasseur is not delivering on that front. Ferrari are off the pecking order. They're well down at the moment. With that double disqualification they had in China, I believe they're fourth currently in the Constructors' Championship. They're well off the pace. They don't look like winning races anytime soon. The upgrades they've got are not upgrades which could make the car make that leap up to get wins soon. So surely Fred Vasseur has got to be feeling the pressure of Ferrari. We know that they've sacked team principals for a lot less than what Fred's actually achieved. Now, he talked openly about, getting Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc as his dream team. That's not worked out for him. And there comes a point when the fans will be getting restless with Fred. There comes a point when they will demand a return on him being team principal. Now, we know he seems to play the political game that's obviously evident in Ferrari. We know that you have to play that to be a team principal within Ferrari. You have to almost do that politics in Maranello. We know that that's why team principals, drivers, even staff have struggled to acclimatise to life in Maranello because it is a very political minefield. We know that Fred clearly plays that well. We know he's very well highly regarded in terms of Ferrari and what they think of him. But also, this is a results business and you have to get results. And at the moment, Ferrari aren't getting those results. And to be honest, they don't look like they're anywhere close to getting those results. They don't look like they've got a silver bullet anywhere. They don't look like, I said, they don't look like an upgrade package is coming to change it. So with that in mind, if we get to the end of the season and Fred Vasseur is currently 3rd or 4th in the Constructors' Championship, will he get another season with Ferrari? Will he get another opportunity with those new regulations? Or will Ferrari actually go, do you know what? We need to make a change, and we need to make that change going into the new season. I generally don't know. I'm not hearing any rumblings that that's the case so far. Just my personal thoughts that he's going to be feeling the pressure and feeling the pinch from not getting those results is something that I feel is going to happen, and happen pretty soon if we get to the summer break and afterwards. And Ferrari are currently, lining up on the 5th row of the grid, for example. That's not where Ferrari want to be, nor where the fans want to be. And I think they're going to start demanding a change. But one to keep an eye on, that's for sure. But Fred Vasseur is certainly under pressure. Make absolutely no doubt about it. So, pecking order, Barcelona and Jonathan Wheatley's comments. Now, Jonathan Wheatley has obviously now started his new role with Sauber, Audi, whatever we're going to call next season. They're currently Sauber. So he started his new role as team principal. We know that Audi have gone through yet another restructuring. We know that Binotto is now firmly in charge of the Formula One side. Wheatley's come on board, and he's talked about the pecking order at Barcelona, and the technical directive that's coming in may well shake things up. Now, we know this is to do with the front wings and the flexi wings. There was a lot of talk last season, obviously, about the rear wings and McLaren and the changes that were made there. But his technical directive is firmly on the front wings and the FIA tests that they're employing for that one. Now, this has been, of course, delayed by the FIA. This was due to be introduced at the start of the 2025 season. But the teams argued that with the cost cap and with the late change in regulations, they didn't have enough time to develop and make changes to the front wings. So it got shelved, basically, until Barcelona. We're now in this triple header. And, of course, at the back of it is Barcelona. We are now here. Do I think this is going to change it? I'm not too sure they change it too much, because the reason is I think the teams have pulled a fast one with the FIA. And what I mean by this is they've given themselves until Barcelona before they make these changes. So they've had plenty of time to do this. Now, I know that kind of contradicts what I just said about the team saying that they can implement it. It's a load of rubbish. The teams can implement it if they wanted to. They were just playing a fast one with the FIA to give themselves more time with either A, the flexi wings if your team running it so you can get more points on the board, or B, to give yourself more time to develop an alternative if you needed to. So I think that's what's going on here. Now, Red Bull are talking about this being an equaliser as well, which kind of fits, I suppose, with Jonathan Wheatley, because obviously that's where he was up until his gardening leave. Red Bull are talking about this being the great equaliser in terms of what's going on. They're talking about this as being the level playing field, that they need to make a step up. Red Bull are introducing upgrades little and often. This is a policy they've adopted for a couple of years now. It's not a new policy at all. So they're bringing stuff in, little by little. What they tend to do is they tend to drip feed it in to make sure it works, make sure the correlation is right, and then roll out the next phase. The problem is when you bring a big upgrade to the track and it doesn't work, you've got to drill into that to find out what part of that upgrade didn't work. And sometimes what you get is you get certain parts working well and just one part letting it down. Whereas if you make that tweaks that part, you get the benefit of the update and that side of things. So for me, that's what they're trying to do. I think that Red Bull, Mercedes adopt that same sort of philosophy. They try doing things very much, little and often to make sure it works. Whereas teams like Ferrari will bring a whole package and go, right, dump it on the car. Here we go. This is what we got. And that's great if you want an instant performance gain, if it works. So I think that what's going on here with this is Red Bull are one of the teams who are experimenting with just a little and often. Mercedes are following the same route. Ferrari don't kind of know what's going on. McLaren haven't brought a lot. They've made tweaks to their car, but then when they're running so far ahead of everybody else, they probably don't need to bring a lot to the track. So they're probably holding some stuff back as well. We know there's been talk about, obviously, their rear brakes, that the FIA had a complaint from Red Bull. That is to gain information. That's to kind of find out what's going on with the rear brakes, in the sense of trying to dive into the detail behind it. When the FIA investigate it, they tend to publish a lot of stuff. What Red Bull are looking for is they're looking for what McLaren are actually doing with those rear brakes and how they're cooling their tyres and how they're keeping their tyre degradation from not going off a cliff like everybody else's. That's what they're looking for. It's not a complaint in the sense of, actually, let's try and do this. They try it just in case something does get banned, because, hey, that's great if it does, because it means you ain't got to spend money developing it. But it's also done to try and unpick what they're doing so they can develop their own and bring it to the track. That's why they do this. But with regards to the pecking order, I'm not too sure we're going to see a massive change at the top. We might see it in the middle. Teams like Williams potentially doing well. Are they running more of a flexible front wing than some of the other teams who, maybe like Haas, for example, who maybe haven't developed two wings, have just gone down the route of we're going to run the stiffer one that's going to be fine post-Barcelona because actually we don't want to waste money on it. There is a bit of that going on, so we could see that in terms of the middle pecking order. I still think the top teams will be there or thereabouts. I think they cancel each other out with upgrades they got coming anyway, so I'm not too sure it's going to be a massive part at the top of the table, but certainly in the mid-table, I think we might see some changes, which is probably where Jonathan's referring to, because obviously that's where Sauber are based. So, yeah, for me, it's quite interesting to see that Sauber had the fastest pit stop at the last Grand Prix. We know that, it's an area where Red Bull has struggled since Jonathan's left. We know it was Jonathan's forte doing those sorts of things. And it's just interesting for me that straight away there's been an increase in performance from Sauber when Jonathan's joined them, and there's been a decrease in performance from Red Bull when Jonathan's left them. So it goes to show you that actually people can make a difference, and a very quick difference on that one. Right, Alpine. Sipping a coffee on this one. Right, so Alpine. So we obviously know news about Oliver Oakes last week. We covered that on last week's podcast. In terms of an update for high tech, I just want to give a quick update because there has been, as per usual, a lot of rumour, speculation and gossip going on. Now, Oliver Oakes hasn't made any official statement. He has reached out to a couple of reporters who have obviously contacted him, and he said that he will reveal all in due course, but at the moment he's not in a position to dive into it, which is most likely because of obviously the criminal proceedings that are going on against William Oakes, his brother, who was obviously arrested. Now, both are still listed as directors of High Tech Grand Prix. They've added in a finance director, which happened last week, and the trucks arrived in Imola without any logos. Now, this caused a lot of speculation over something that's going on at High Tech. However, it seems to be a little bit more innocent than that. So when the team were reached out for comment, they said that basically it's a branding exercise and that the livery was stripped off the lorries, ready for the new branding to go on after the triple header. Now, some people are saying that's just rubbish, and of course the team would say that. But if you look at the cars have still got the High Tech branding on them, still got logos on them, and also Company's House to show no changes. Whilst, yes, we have to take stuff with a pinch of salt, I absolutely get that. We also have to understand that sometimes there's prearranged stuff that happen and it's just unfortunate timing, which is kind of what this feels like. At the moment, there's no update on High Tech at all. Like I said, there's no changes to Company's House. There's no statement from the team. They're very much carrying on as business as usual. Like I say, the cars, if they had been impounded, that wasn't proven to be true. Again, it was another one of those, was it true or not? The cars, if they were impounded, are certainly at Imola, so they're certainly out of there. Oliver is in Dubai as far as we know, but like I said, that's not been officially confirmed. But going back to Alpine, now we saw that statement that Alpine put out that Flavio Briatore is in charge of Alpine in terms of the role of team principal. We know he's not the team principal. We know he's carrying out his current role, but exhuming the activities of a team principal. Now, interestingly, the FIA have said, no, he's not. And this is what I love about Formula One. You learn stuff all the time. Now, everyone who belongs to a Formula One team who carries out like a management role have to be licensed by the FIA. They have to be registered and they have to be licensed. Now, interestingly, Flavio Briatore is not licensed in any way by the FIA. He's actually not listed as an employee of Alpine because he's directly employed as a consultant by the Renault parent group to carry out his role as an executive consultant to Alpine Formula One team. So he's not on any register for the FIA. So he actually can't be the team principal in the eyes of the FIA. Now, they've actually appointed racing director Dave Greenwood. He worked with Oliver Oakes back at High Tech, and he's worked with other Formula One teams as well, Ferrari, Marisha in the past, I believe. So he's very experienced. He's stayed, even though Oliver Oakes has gone. And he is now, according to the FIA, the person in charge of Alpine. Now, reality is we know he's not. We know that Flavio Briatore is in charge. We know that Flavio is in charge by all intents and purposes. It's just really interesting. Now, Alpine have been reached out for comment. They said, well, there's nothing to tell, really. Flavio has been employed by the Renault board. That's always been the case. He's not employed by Alpine. Therefore, he's not employed by Alpine. He's not been registered with the FIA. He's not our team principal, nor have we got any intention of him being the team principal. So, therefore, we haven't registered him. The FIA have come out and said, well, it's up to Alpine who they register. We can just tell you who is registered, and that's obviously Greenwood. It's not Flavio Briatore. So from all intents and purposes, it's going to be us. It remains to be seen what happens with like media duties and things like that. Will Flavio Briatore be attending the FIA media duties, or will it actually have to be Greenwood, and that Flavio will do, the Sky, the F1 TV, those sort of television interviews? But actually, when it comes to the FIA press conferences, we're going to see Flavio Briatore. So I'm really intrigued to see what goes on with that and the dynamic with that one. with regards to obviously, Alpine and Briatore, there is a lot of talk in the paddock. It's because you can be refused a license on ethical grounds. And one of the things on there is the rule about, asking your driver to crash deliberately would mean that you wouldn't potentially get a license. So is this a case of Alpine are dodging a very, a very public display of the FIA saying no to Flavio Briatore and get the license? And this is actually all a big workaround. Now, like I said, Alpine are not confirming that. They're saying, no, that's, just further from the truth. It's just one of those things. It's just something we've never done, or do we see any need to do so? We've got Greenwood, so therefore he's going to carry out the duties in terms of the FIA, and that Flavio doesn't need to do that. For me personally, I think it's maybe the latter. I think the politics and the optics mean that Alpine don't want a situation where the FIA say no to Flavio Briatore, and maybe the FIA don't want to be in a position where if they say yes to Flavio Briatore holding the license to be the team principal of Alpine, if they say yes, it kind of goes against their own policies, which looks bad on them. So either way, it feels like it's a no-win situation. So the best way to deal with this is to not register him and not give him a license, which is what's currently happened. I would imagine Alpine would have sounded out the FIA about the potential of having a license. So I imagine the feedback is that they're probably not inclined to give him one. So rather than officially do it and be very publicly slap no, which would be obviously a major story in Formula One, I think they've done this workaround where Greenwood, by all intents and purposes, is the man in charge. But reality is, it's Flavio Briatore acting on behalf of the Renault board, and he's not actually an Alpine employer, which isn't news to us. We knew that he was there, on behalf of the Renault board. That part isn't a surprise. It's just interesting that we learn stuff about licenses and registrations, which even now in Formula One, you kind of learn new stuff, which I just thought was pretty cool and quite interesting to see. So yeah, I'm watching those FIA press releases over who's attending the press conferences with one BDR on them to see just exactly who Alpine choose to go to the press releases. And then we're going to finish off with a bit of an FIA update. I haven't done a video on this because it's really long and really complicated into what they've done. And I'm very conscious that with some of my videos that, sometimes they can go on too long, and I don't want people to sort of feel that. So now the FIA have got two updates. They've got the changes that the FIA president, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, is making with regards to the sporting changes. And there's the changes that he's made with regards to the misconduct regulations. Now, basically, this is a bit of a climb down from Mohammed Ben Sulayem in terms of the swearing, the fines, that side of thing. This is obviously on the back of a lot of feedback. We know that we had that backing down over the rally drivers. We know that the GDPA have said the same with regards to George Russell leading that charge, saying that they wanted some changes to it. Now, as it stands, they've revised the misconduct regulations. So the maximum fines are down from €10,000 to €5,000. The stewards have now got a discretion to suspend first offences if they feel it's necessary, or if it's then extenuating circumstance like a race condition. So they can actually suspend them if they want to. They don't have to give them out. Whereas before, I think they were obliged to give them out. So I think that was kind of part of the problem. There's also now fines and penalties for abuse of officials, criticism of the FIA, political agendas, stuff like that, with a higher fine now of €20,000. Now, this is the bit that's kind of muddied the waters a bit. The first part, reducing the fines, where they're now saying that if you make, a swearing on the team radio, it's probably going to be okay. But if you do it in a press conference, it's going to be a fine. Now, I've talked about this open and honestly. I feel that's absolutely right. If it's in the heat of the moment and you swear at someone because someone's cut you up, as I said before, absolutely get that. If you're doing that, should be let go. But if you're doing it in a press conference, then actually you should get fined for that, because you're in a press conference, you've got out the car, you're on TV, it's going to be televised. It's a very different kettle of fish. So I kind of agree with that one. Now, this part about abuse of officials, criticism of the FIA, this is a bit that's muddying the waters, because what people are worried about, now this hasn't been confirmed or not. Now, does Mohammed Ben Sulayem regard himself as an official by being the president of the FIA? Now, if he regards himself as an official, that means he now has the authority to issue a penalty against someone speaking out against him personally and what he's doing. Now, that feels like it's a censorship thing. That's why it's getting big concerns over this. If he's putting himself in that category of an official, which I'm pretty sure he would do, that now leaves himself protected against people speaking out against anything he does. And that's kind of still wrong when we talk about the democratic procedure of the FIA. We've heard this a lot about censorship. We've heard this a lot about moves being made in place. And it's like the changes to sporting regulations. So the changes that are being proposed by Mohammed Ben Sulayem are changes that stifle democracy, they stifle free speech, and along with like the NDAs and changes already been put in place, that kind of feels wrong. So he's saying that he now wants changes to screen the presidential candidates, give them more time to refer them to the ethics committee to see if something's wrong with them standing as president of the FIA. There's also going to be, changes to appointing members where he wants 4 members appointed by him without any sort of recourse on it. Now, I'm not naive enough. If someone is appointing somebody to a board, they are going to be loyal to the person appointed them. Let's be honest about it. That's what that's all about. If you're appointing 4 members, those 4 members are going to vote for you on every single occasion. That makes it an undemocratic representation. Now, changing the rules to the ethics committee, that sounds okay on paper. Don't get me wrong. If we hadn't last year changed the ethics committee to say that the only person in charge of the ethics committee is the actual FIA president and one other, not the actual ethics committee. Now, if the ethics committee was still in their oversee role as they would have been last year before those changes, that would have all been fine. But that feels like the FIA president can now scrutinise a candidate standing against the FIA president. Are you getting me drift? That just feels wrong. And it just feels like this is the wrong way to go on that promise. And these were Mohammed Ben Sulayem's promise that the FIA would be more open and transparent with him in power. They are not. They're the opposite. And they're leaving themselves just wide open to criticism, leaving themselves wide open to speculation about that this is censorship with all these NDAs, these high-profile departures, this criticism, this you can't criticise the FIA. You should be allowed to criticise the FIA, providing you're not being abusive in any way, as long as you're not being derogatory in any way. You should be able to stand up to stewards' decisions. You should be able to stand up to what the FIA implement. That is free speech. You should be allowed to do that as a member, a team, or as anybody else. Now, also, some of the changes to the penalties are, if a team is found guilty, they can apply a penalty to both cars. That, again, feels too much of an overreach. You don't need to do that. It should be a fine. It should stay as a fine. It shouldn't be anything to do with sporting penalties to the cars if it's for something like criticising the FIA. Now, if it's, you're breaking the rules on something, as in the technical rules, absolutely apply a sporting penalty to the teams that affects the cars. But if you're just criticising the FIA president, it feels very harsh that both your cars are getting penalised, because that is censorship. And like I say, all of this goes against the FIA being open and transparent. All of this goes against democracy. All of this goes against freedom of speech. You shouldn't be afraid to be criticised. You shouldn't be afraid to be challenged. That's not what being in a position of power is all about. You should be open to those discussions. You should be open to those. You should be able to sit down and explain your actions and explain why, not just stifle it and make it not happen. That, for me, is a step too far. I think that the FIA need to get on board with this very fast. They need to find a way to stop these things going through. And maybe it's as simple as the FIA president can't make changes in an election year, to benefit anybody. So maybe there's changes to regulations you can't do in an election year because actually you're going to be, potentially standing and you're going to be potentially one of the candidates going. So maybe the FIA just needs something simple like that to stop all this stuff happening. But again, the timing seems really weird. Carlos Sainz announces that he's going to be running as president, and now we've got this in place where we can now scrutinise, and we have to put extra time in to allow that scrutiny to happen. It just feels wrong. It feels like it's just designed to stop someone standing against him. And when people would have much more respect for Mohammed Ben Sulayem if he won an election fair and square, and ultimately, it's not up to us to dictate an FIA election. It's up to the FIA to facilitate that, and we get no say in it. But how much better would it be if that process was open, honest, democratic, with candidates to stand against? Mohammed would actually have much more stature by saying, I stood against these candidates and I beat them. Now, you could all argue over whether or not he should be in charge or not in charge, but if you stood a fair election with candidates involved and you win said election, you've kind of just got to accept it. If that's democracy at its best. What people can't accept is this constant changing the rules to make it look like it favours you in power. That's not good. That's not democratic. It's not right, and it needs to stop. the policy's been in place. These changes don't bring that much value to the FIA. They don't bring that much value to making a change. It's more negative than positive. So I don't understand why this is happening. I don't understand why people from within the FIA aren't actually standing up and saying, look, this is making us look really undemocratic. This is making it look wrong. This is making it look like, we are fixing an election as such. So I think that the members need to kind of grow a bit of a backbone, if I'm being honest here, and kind of stand up to it and say, look, at the moment, keep those changes. If you are the president after the election, then yes, we revisit them and look at them. But in terms of before an election, absolutely not. Shouldn't be changing anything. It needs to stay democratic. It needs to stay open and honest. It needs to stay fair. And moving the goalposts before an election is not fair, is not democratic. And same with the censorship with regards to officials and things like that. You should be able to stand up to the FIA and say, we don't agree that's a penalty, and here's the reasons why. It might not change the penalty, but you should be able to have that conversation where you challenge them and you put them into a position where they have to explain them. You shouldn't just have a complete censorship which says, we're going to get it right all the time. It's human involved in this. Human nature will always mean there's an error involved. And you've also got to be big enough to own up to things when you make a mistake and say, you know what, we called this penalty, but we got it wrong. So for me, it needs to stop. Like I say, no changes to the FIA rules in an election year should be a given. And I hope that people listen. And I hope that the people involved with the FIA kind of get a backbone and sort of start saying no and making this a fair and democratic process. So at least when the election goes ahead at the back end of this year, we can say it was done fairly. And if Mohammed is still the president, then do you know what? We can't have any complaints, can we? Right. I think that's it. We're at the 30-minute marks. Yeah. Time flies when you're having fun, doesn't it? So generally hope you've enjoyed the podcast. As always, if you could do me a favor, leave a review, hit a like, hit a follow, comment. All those things help the algorithm know that I'm actually out there and not just sat in my shed talking to myself. I would really appreciate it. I've loved the feedback from the podcast so far this year since we've gone weekly. I've loved the fact that people are getting in touch on it. I am trying to work on getting some guests on the show. It's something I want to do. It's something I've talked about for a while. So I'm working on what to do and how to get people on the show. So hopefully I can bring you some guests this year as well. And yeah, that's pretty much it from me. So I won't keep you much longer. So tune in next week. Formula One Espresso News will be back. And you've been listening to me, Terry. And this is Coffee Corner Motorsport. Full Beans, the podcast. See you next week.